Casting with Ceri Jones.
Well, welcome everyone. After a short break through work commitments and fishing, it's good to be back doing the podcasts again. And I've got some great guests lined up. And this one is a little bit special because for those of you who've got an interest in salmon and bass, there's some great info on this podcast. He lives beside the Copper Coast in Waterford, Southeast Ireland. So it comes as no surprise he has a love for fishing for bass. Plus, with two great rivers on his doorstep, the Slaney and the Suir, he talks of his passion for salmon also. His 9-to-5 work as a fish scientist for the Fishery Board and as a PhD in fish behaviour. Sounds like a perfect job for many of us. He goes on to talk about some of the studies and findings, including how the rising and setting of the moon can affect catches. Plus something I am especially interested in is the behaviour of Ferox Trout. Welcome to my chat with James Barry.
Ceri, how's it going?
Well, welcome James.
Thank you, Ceri. Thanks for having me on.
Well, do you know what? I've been looking forward to this chat since I talked to you back a couple of weeks ago. And usually when I chat to different guests, I know what I'm going to talk about. But after chatting to you last week or the week before, you're a fish scientist, you've got a passion for bass and a passion for salmon. And I noticed last week you've caught your personal best brown and Sheelin as well, didn't you?
Yeah. We had a weekend up in Lough Sheelin last weekend, and we were there for 2 days. Very tough fishing, but we did manage to get one nice fish, and I was absolutely made up with that fish. He was just over 5 pounds, so
that's nice.
I you can still hear the smile on my face when I'm talking about that one. It was just fantastic.
Was the mayfly up there?
It was. So I have some friends who fish Sheelin quite a bit, and Sheelin came on my radar maybe 3 years ago now, and they invited me up to try the mayfly, and I jumped on the opportunity, went over, fished with the guys. And we had some good fishing. There was, all dry fly stuff, 6 weights, casting for rising fish. I absolutely loved it. And I said, right, this has to be something that I'm going to do annually. So I've been going back since, excluding COVID year last year. I've been there every year since. And this year we went up, and the spent knot coming off it was incredible.
Was it?
The sight on one of the evenings, there was a kind of a breeze blown over our shoulders, and we were fishing into this bay. I don't lie to you, Ceri, there was thousands and thousands. There was no end to the mayfly that were coming off.
Really?
But the trout were kind of staying down for whatever reason. I don't know the ins and outs of Sheelin as well as others that fish it all the time, but we didn't see a lot of fish rising that evening. I'm sure the locals will be able to tell you why, or maybe the wind was in the wrong direction or something like that. But
yeah,
it just wasn't. It just kind of felt like it was building. You're just waiting for this almighty bang of trout to explode on the surface and start feeding like crazy, but it never really happened.
wow.
And this spent fishing in the evening time was really, really difficult. And we actually had the one good fish in the morning. We got up at silly o'clock, 4 a.m. I think, and we headed out. There was actually a funny story behind it. The engine wouldn't start on the boat, so you obviously get down to your boat, you're ready to go, you're looking out on the lake, and we go to pull the engine, no go out of the engine. So I was just annoyed over the top of the boat, and my friend that was with me, Jason, said, "Oh look, I'll just row us over to this bay, and we'll give it a go." And at this stage, I was sitting up top. I was just annoyed, the engine not working.
Yeah.
Ready to go back to the B&B and just say, that's it, enough of this. But Jason, thankfully, anyway, rowed us over to the little bay. And as we were approaching, or probably 100 yards out, we could just see, I was sitting up the top, we could see this fish just sitting behind an island. And I shouted back to Jason, I think I see something here. Yeah. And sure enough, we kind of rowed up onto this island, really nice and stealthy, actually. Now that I look back at it, it probably helped us a bit that the engine didn't start.
Yeah.
And it's just sipping away, and I just set up the fly, waited for the fish to come up, textbook stuff, just drop the fly beside where he came up, and sure enough, he just came up and had it, and then all hell broke loose. It was just almighty battle, and he was just such a pretty fish,
Wow.
and yeah, definitely one I won't forget in a while. Just great buzz, just food for the fly fishing soul up there around Mayfly time. It's great fun.
Yeah. Well, it must have been a blessing, really, that the engine didn't work.
That's it, everything, all
Everything
these things
for a
happen
reason.
for a reason, as they say. Yeah.
Did you get it to work
so
after?
I was messaging Jason saying that all I need is a bit of sunshine on the engine there will heat it up a bit. And sure enough, when the sun came up and hit it, it was fine. One turn of the engine, it started, and we headed off then, but we actually didn't catch that for the rest of the morning.
Yeah.
And again, we struggled that evening. So yeah, it was definitely a blessing in disguise. But I'll definitely be back. It's just a mecca there at Mayfly time. The amount of boats on the lake this Mayfly was just incredible. I remember on the Saturday evening, I suppose we were there peak time, peak weekend. So like there must have been hundreds of boats on there. Everywhere you look, everyone's there trying to get their big trophy trout. But it's great fun. Yeah, I really enjoy it. But it's a nice break from what we normally do. It's just totally different. Kind of out of the comfort zone of swinging flies or casting big flat wings out on the coast. It's just totally different. It's a nice break.
It's my cup of tea. That is, I love being on a boat and fishing for browns. And funny enough, I've been looking this morning. I'm going to buy electric engine because it'd be ideal, especially when you're fishing on your own. It's difficult. You're seeing cruising fish. You want someone on the oars to push you over them. And so I think I'm going to invest in a good electric engine.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. That's a big thing up on Sheelin. So we didn't have an electric engine this time, but when I fished with my friends in the past, they swear by the electric engine.
Yeah.
Because, in a calm evening where it's kind of slicked off, the fish can have no direction to where they're moving. You can't really predict where they might come up again because, they're not coming up a wind lane or kind of, coming at you. So the guys will actually, as they say, they hunt, they turn on their electric engine and they'll move towards fish and look for fish.
Yeah.
That was great fun. We didn't have that. We didn't have the electric engine when we were on the weekend. So it was one of us on the oars, and the other was casting to fish. And looking back now, we both said it when we came off the lake. Next year, we're definitely bringing an electric engine, and you can see that nearly all the local guys have their electric engine mounted on the side of their boat. So it's definitely a plus. I think it will help you a lot.
Yeah, I'm on the case. I'm going to get one next week, I think. What will you be fishing it again this year, or is that it? Just to fish the Mayfly and then you're back on the salt then?
Yeah, I think that will probably be our little trip up. Now, I might go up again because, as I was saying, my friends are up there and they said that the sedge fishing later on the year can be fantastic. And indeed, work might take me up that way. But yeah, for the time being, I think that might be it for the lake trout fishing. I really enjoy it. It's just it's a 4 hour drive to get me to those lakes from where I am.
Is it?
So it's definitely just a little kind of thing that we do when we can, a nice little break.
So where is it you live then?
So I am in a place called Waterford, which is down the southeast corner of Ireland.
Yeah.
In between Wexford and Cork. And that's home, yeah, it always has been. Kind of the rivers, I suppose, that are close by to me that people would know would be the River Suir and the Munster Blackwater.
Yeah.
And then 2 minutes from me is most bass anglers will know this place called Copper Coast. It's kind of well known and well documented stretch of coastline in Ireland now for its bass fishing. And that's literally a stone's throw from the house. And yeah, that's home, spoiled for choice with fishing, really.
Do you know, most of us from over here, over the water in Wales, like we automatically think of places like Sheelin and the West, the Corrib or the Mask, or even down in Kerry. And Waterford is a place where over the years I've just come over on the ferry and you just drive past, not realising there's great fish in there as well. But I did fish Knockaderry, and I remember you saying it's not too far from you.
Yeah, it's probably only 5 minutes from my house. I fished Knockaderry on maybe one occasion, if even, when I just started fly fishing.
Yeah.
And that was it. I don't fish it. It's just one of those things. I have, the shore so close, and the bass fishing on the coast as well. It's just one of those places that I haven't really got into the rainbow trout fishing because there's just too many other choices. Spoiled for choice, yeah.
Yeah. So your passion then, from what I can see and what you were saying actually in the last chat we had, is really bass and your salmon.
Yes, yeah. I suppose those two species kind of dominate my angling world. I suppose at the moment, locally anyway. They're the salmon and the bass and mainly on the fly is how I like to target them.
Right.
And time of the year really kind of dictates where I go and what I'm after. So I suppose at the moment the salmon blinkers are on to a certain degree with trying to get to the rivers, try to get a spring salmon.
Yeah.
And that's been good. It's since the restrictions were lifted, we've been able to travel to a few of the rivers locally, and it's been good fishing. We've been having some nice runs of fish coming into the rivers, which is fantastic. I've got to fish one of the well-known rivers in Wexford, the River Slaney, this year, and that's been really great. And it has a really nice run of early fish. Kind of April, May will be the bulk of the run of fish into that river. Now it does get a kind of grilse run as well, but it's kind of renowned for those early fish. And I've had some really nice days on that river this year, and then it will kind of switch to the River Suir and the Munster Blackwater now in the coming months.
You've had a few salmon this year already, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been good. The Slaney, it's kind of been my first year really kind of spending some time on the River Slaney, so it's been really enjoyable trying to get to know that fishery and that kind of stretch of river that I've got onto this year. And I've been very lucky. The river levels have been really good the few times I've got down there, and there has been fish in the river. So a lot of it as well has just been on the river when the fish run through. If they're there, they're generally an honest enough fish to take a fly. At this time of the year, big fresh salmon will generally cooperate if you put it in front of his nose. So yeah, I've had a few, and it's been great. Yeah, really really nice fishing this year.
Is that like a club water? Is it, or is it a ticket water?
It's they kind of run a syndicate. So how it works is you get one rod for one day during the season. So what I'll get is a Monday, or you might get a Tuesday or Thursday, and that'll be your day per se. And you go down on that day and you fish it for the day, and you'll have the whole fishery to yourself. So that's how it works. It's a funny kind of setup. I haven't come across it elsewhere, but it works. It's great. And there's like maybe 3 rods on that day with you, and you get to know the guys that are fishing as well. It's a big long fishery, and yeah, it works, and it's actually quite a nice setup in comparison to my kind of local water on the River Suir, which would be association water, and you can fish whatever day you want, and you just got to make sure you're the guy who gets to the river first if you want to fish the spot first. So it's different, all right, but it's nice.
Yeah, and what's the size of the springers that come in there then?
So every year there's fish up to kind of 20 pounds recorded. Mid-teen fish are common, and maybe probably that kind of 10 to 12 pound range is kind of is what I've seen most regularly on the Slaney this year. I've been lucky. I have one up around 13 pounds, and the rest have kind of been kind of 10, kind of 11 pound weight. So it's been good. I mean, when those fish fresh off the tide, the fish I've had have kind of all had sea lice on them. You just got to hold on and hold on and hope for the best. They're great fun.
Yeah. Well, before we come on to the bass, because I'm keen to pick your brains on the bass, because I've been out twice now the last couple of weeks, and I haven't let the fish yet. But there's something I want to talk to you about, is because I noticed on your Instagram page that the description and like the bio, you're a fish scientist, And I thought that was just something like somebody, you'd put on because you got a passion for the fish. But it wasn't until I actually spoke to you, that is your actual work, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So officially, the 9 to 5 is a fish scientist. So I work for inland fisheries in research, and we kind of we do varied work on different projects, trying to kind of enhance fish populations around the country, and that's the day job. And I suppose it started for me when I was kind of 16, 17. I knew that I was going to be, fishing was some way going to be part of what I do, I suppose. And I decided to go to college to do environmental science. And, I wanted to kind of work with the environment or do something along those lines.
Yeah.
Kind of had dreams of maybe being a marine biologist or something like that, when you're watching David Attenborough shows and things.
Yeah.
But anyways, I went off to Cork, did my environmental science degree, and it was actually sitting in a lecture in year one, and I didn't particularly like the course. It was okay, but year one is kind of a general science course.
Yeah.
So it was chemistry, physics, all this sort of stuff, and I was eventually we had one kind of ecology lecture, and I specifically remember this lecture. He sat up there and he talked about brown trout genetics. As an angler, I mean, I was just like in awe of all these slides of different trout from various places, and he's showing the genetic differences between populations and why it's important from a conservation perspective. And from that point, Kerry, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So I ended up specialising in zoology, and I ended up actually working with that lecturer and different kind of brown trout stuff. We ended up doing a salmon project together. And from there, kind of went on and did a master's in fisheries in Scotland. And that led to a PhD. So I ended up spending the bones of five years in Scotland on and off, which was fantastic, both from a kind of science perspective and from a fishing perspective. It was a great few years, and that was all in my 20s, where I was just kind of fishing mad and doing the science work as well on the side, I suppose.
Yeah,
it was good.
On the fish the PhD is in the fish behaviour, then, is it, you said?
Yeah, so I worked in a place in Scotland. It was through the University of Glasgow, and it's a Scottish Centre for Ecology and Natural Environment. And my PhD came out when there was a big European funded project, and they took on a load of students, and they were pretty much all kind of fish behaviour PhDs. There was one person looking at sea trout, another person looking at salmon, other people looking at Ferox trout. I was looking at European eels in lake habitats and their kind of migration routes, because they're kind of critically endangered fish species as well. And we all kind of worked together on different projects, helping out and doing kind of tagging work. And in general, they were all kind of fish behaviour and evolutionary biology PhDs, looking at the differences between populations, and maybe looking at ways to kind of restore threatened populations and trying to record populations at risk. So it was a fun PhD, lots of really interesting stuff, and really nice Ferox work that I know you'd be particularly interested in. And in general, it was a great couple of years.
I was fascinated. One thing you mentioned, I'm not sure if it was you or your friend had done some research on, was it the Ness or was it Lomond?
Yeah, so my friend Martin did his PhD on Ferox Trout. Did an excellent piece of work looking at the differences between kind of behaviourally between Ferox Trout and brown trout. So what he did was, I'm pretty sure it was on the Ness system. It might have actually been up on Rannoch as well, or one of those tributaries, where he collected brown trout and collected Ferox trout. And within the research centre that we were working in, there was an artificial stream. These are called flume streams. They're really cool. So it's kind of circular chamber setup. And you, as the researcher, sit in the middle of the chamber and you watch the fish. I mean, it's great fun. Like
I bet.
you watch how their behaviour is changing. So Martin's question for his this particular little piece of work that he was doing was, are the offspring from Ferox Trout behaviourally different to the offspring from brown trout? And the reason you'd look at something like this would be, so one of the most, I'll kind of rewind a little bit, one of the most important things for distinguishing between brown trout and Ferox trout is whether they're reproductively isolated. So if, let's say, a Ferox trout, what you'll find is that in places like Loch Melvin, Loch Corrib, the Ferox trout will spawn in specific areas. So one specific tributary will be a Ferox tributary. And one specific tributary, we'll say in Corrib, will be the Cong where they do their business.
Yeah. And
this is important to try to understand. And he was trying to understand why this happens. Do the Ferox have a specific stream that they run to, and do they outcompete the trout? Because obviously the trout will run to this stream as well. And what makes the Ferox kind of take over a stream, so to speak.
Yeah.
So what he did was he set up the chambers, and he ran 30 different trials on the offspring from the brown trout and the Ferox trout. And in 29 out of the 30 trials, the Ferox trout completely outcompeted the brown trout, and the brown trout offspring became very submissive, and the dominant species in the chamber was the Ferox trout. So that has all sorts of implications to kind of show that, okay, maybe the Ferox trout kind of outcompete the browns and make it kind of a Ferox only stream. So that's really important from a kind of a reproductive barriers to kind of isolation of a population to one particular tributary. So really interesting stuff. And he also did some tracking work, and we looked at things like moon phases, links to that within his tracking work, and it was just it was a very very interesting PhD, because the first Ferox to be kind of called Salmo Ferox, which people are beginning to identify now. You need to have this kind of genetically distinct, so they're not interbreeding with brown trout. And what Martin should understand was, why aren't they interbreeding? And it's highly likely that they're just far more dominant, and they just can take over that habitat, and that can kind of lead to kind of genetic isolation, and therefore Salmo Ferox, so to speak.
I'm like a sponge now listening to all this. It's fascinating. And to think that they're dominant at a really early stage.
It's so interesting. And I mean, trout are just such an interesting species to study. It's really, really interesting stuff. And they estimate that there was 6 lineages that kind of started to colonize Ireland after the last ice age and the UK. And that amongst these lineages, one of them was the Ferox. So the Ferox trout, like in Corrib and Mask, would be kind of more closely related to the Ferox trout in Awe in Scotland, than the trout in the streams, breeding a few tributaries down, which is really interesting stuff, and all that kind of how that those genes are linked up to environmental factors and longevity and feeding processes. I just find very, very interesting. Anyway.
Yeah, like for years, no one really knew, if it was a different strain or if it was. I always thought for years that the Ferox was a brown trout that just got to sort of like maybe £3, £4 and just turned cannibal then, and they just sort of got bigger. But it's not necessarily the case then. It's an actual separate species then.
Yeah, so all the signs lead to Ferox trout being genetically distinct from other trout in the lakes that they looked at. So Andy Ferguson is a very well known fish scientist, and he's done a lot of this genetic work. And anybody that's interested in Ferox trout and lineages and stuff like that, there's really nice presentations online. So if you put in like Andy Ferguson Ferox trout, there's really nice kind of PowerPoint presentations that explain the different how they diagnostically look at the differences between fish and gill rakers, jaw length, snout length, stuff like that, which is which is really interesting how the fish adapt to their environment. So it's well worth a look if you're interested in that sort of thing. Yeah.
So your experience then with your work, being as the background as a scientist and the behaviour and that, it's helped you in your catch rate, no doubt. I suppose, like, if you go fishing, can you put it down as overtime?
Sometimes, but not as much as I'd like. But yeah, I suppose the science and there's such a they're kind of intertwined, I suppose, to a certain degree in my work and what I do outside of work. And yeah, in certain occasions and on certain projects, they definitely overlap 100%. Because sometimes we need to catch fish to tag and things like that, and the best way to catch them is by rod and line, and that's great when that works out. But yeah, I suppose I'm kind of one of those anglers, I think, that likes to be fully connected to the system or to the fish that you're trying to catch, and try to understand, I suppose, what's going on. I was saying to a friend when we came back from Lough Sheelin, I kind of felt it didn't do it justice. You're kind of hit and run. You're there for 2 days. You don't really fully understand the dynamics of what's going on or where the fish are moving. I much prefer being, really in deep in a fishery where you kind of understand what's happening, when it's happening, and why it might be happening.
Yeah.
That's what I really enjoy about the salmon and bass fishing, because it's so close to me. I'm like, I wake up, I look at the water levels most days, I see what the tide is doing. I'm talking to guys kind of that are out there probably as much as I'd like to be out there at the moment, but they're out there a lot. So you really get a feel for how the fishery is. And that for me is great. And I suppose the science work kind of feeds into that, because it just it answers some of those questions, or helps to answer some of those questions you have when you're interested in certain fisheries.
Yeah, it was fascinating when we spoke last. You were saying about the moon phases. Now, obviously, when it comes to the tides, it's for everyone to see. You can see the tide comes in, the fish are coming, and the high tides when there's a big moon and that. But there's a part of the cycle of the phase of the moon which didn't even occur to me would be anything involved, in the fishing, and that's even in the day you get in
absolutely
the differences.
Yeah. So this was something that it's called the Lunar theory, and this came on my radar back when I was in college when this first kind of popped up. Now, I don't think I had any sort of formal lecture on this or anything like that, but I think it was actually on a internet forum, and I saw a well-known angler from Waterford, well-known bass angler, used to plot these graphs of his bass catches, and he related it to moon phase. And at the time, 20-something-year-old, mad for bass, just mad to catches, obsessed with numbers and trying to catch loads of fish. I just ate this stuff up, and I started looking at the solar lunar theory that he mentioned in more detail, and how he was linking his moon phases to catch rates. So what he was looking at was new moon, full moon, and how it was affecting the catch rates. And at these times, on these spring tides, you'd get a huge increase in the number of fish you'd encountered. And so I just found that really interesting. I started to look into it a bit more, and it actually turns out that in the 20s, I think it was 1920s, there was a guy I think it was out of Florida. I'm not too sure on this, so I better not be quoted. John Knight was his name. I think he was looking at catch rates in either the Southern America area, and he was looking at sun and moon and how they affected fishing, and the sol for sun and lunar for moon. So that's where the lunar name came from. And he was looking at this theory of how these patterns might be affecting animal movement. So he kind of put a load of factors together, which he thought might influence the day-to-day behavior of freshwater and saltwater fish. And I think he looked at a load of different potential factors. And of all those factors, he had the three which were left, which was the sun, the moon, and the tide. But obviously, tide doesn't affect freshwater fish.
No.
But he started to look at the moon phases. So we have new moon and full moon, which are important times from a tide perspective. But each and every day we have moonrise and moonset, which occurs. And then we also have meridian crossing, where the moon is directly overhead or directly underhead. It's starting to get a bit complicated now, but I promise you, it's really, really kind of simple stuff. It's just trying to figure out when moonrise and moonset is in the day. But what he noticed anyways, catch rates and animal behavior and animal movement was really closely linked to these lunar times.
Right.
And so I read this and I was like, God, this is great. And I started looking back at my catch rates. And sure enough, that not every time, absolutely not every time that I was out, it wasn't like, I was catching all my fish on moonrise or moonset times. But on certain kind of sessions where we had particularly good session where you might have had multiple fish caught, and everything just seemed to be right, and everything was just, the fish were properly on. They fell into these periods that he had spoken about.
Yeah.
So I started to log all this and keep a note of it. And I won't say I've fished the moon phase now, but I definitely take it into consideration, just like a salmon angler would take into consideration barometric pressure or water clarity. It's definitely something. I'll just have it. There's an app you can get on your phone. You can look at it to see what time the moon rise is or the moon set is, and you can just keep it there to keep it in mind anyway. Because at the end of the day, if we go away for a 4-day bass trip, all my friends now are kind of aware of the moon phase. They all have the stuff on the app on their phone now as well, and we won't not be on the water for a moonrise or moonset. We make sure nowadays, where in the past we might have ignored it, we make sure that we're kind of on the rocks or on the beach, so we don't miss those times. We're not sitting in the house eating lunch when it's moonrise, even though we think the tide mightn't be right.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely keep an eye on it, and it's definitely something to keep in mind when bass fishing. It's an interesting thing that's happened too many times now for it to be coincidence,
Yeah. I remember when we spoke last, I said about, I gave you 2 dates where I had just 2 of the largest ferox I had. And they coincided with a certain time where the moon had, what was it, set?
Set.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just when the moon had set, but it was in the day. So I was unaware of anything with the moon. You don't in the day. You don't, last thing you think of. But it's strange that it actually, coincidence maybe, I don't know, but I doubt it. But
yeah, I've had the exact same moment happen to me, Ceri, so many times. Whereas I've looked at, say, a picture from 10 years ago, really nice bass. I go, oh, when was that caught? And it'll have the date time stamp. I go back and look through the date time, and sure enough, it would be close to moonrise, it would be close to moonset, or it would be close to one of the other factors.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really interesting one, and definitely one worth just for a bass angler to keep in mind when he's out fishing. And I definitely wouldn't let it dictate where I'm going or when I'm going, but one to kind of definitely keep in mind. And I've had I think there's loads of stuff have been done on this in kind of peer review publications since, with regards to animal movement and hunting. So this theory is used a lot for hunting and things like that. And they follow these moonrise, moonset times religiously because it has such effect on the animal behavior.
Yeah.
I know when I was speaking to that, so I was telling you about the time I've been trying to keep an eye on this when I'm salmon fishing. I don't know if it's as much of a factor, but I do keep an eye on moonrise, moonset times. And I was watching it one day, and I was just moving my way down through the river, and just looked at my watch. Like, oh yeah, moonrise now is in another few minutes. And right on moonrise that morning, when I was coming down the river, almost to the minute, an otter just appeared out of his hold just as the moonrise clicked in, we'll say. And that for me then was just one of those other moments where I was just like, oh my God, this is definitely something worth looking at or keeping in mind anyway.
They're more in tune with nature animals. I think we've lost it over the years, of the millennia probably. I think we've definitely missed something. And the times where I've said, I might been days and days without a fish, and then as soon as I hook one, I have a call from a mate who was a couple of miles down on the lake, and he's had one the same time. And that happened 3 times. So it shows there's something which we are not understanding. It's not a coincidence, where you go
definitely not. Yeah. And when you say that there about your friend calling you around the same time, this happens with a lot on the coast as well. So the Copper Coast is 25 kilometers long, and we could be fishing 10, 15 kilometers apart. But it's very similar ground, very similar kind of terrain, and characteristics are very similar between spots. So, generally if the conditions are good, up the coast are good down the coast. And, we'd be keeping in touch, WhatsApp or calling, whatever. And sure enough, almost to the minute, you'd make that phone call to say, oh yeah, a few fish have turned on here. They'd be like, yeah, the exact same. So, there's definitely there's something that triggers them into a feeding behavior. Absolutely, we see this from the tracking work as well. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And the bass, 100%. Maybe not as strong for the salmon, but the bass in particular, like a moonrise to coincide with sunset. That's just the kind of a special kind of magic period that seems to just really get the bass going.
This is all quite new to me, this bass fishing. I started last. Well, I've had the odd day over the years, and I've caught. But last year I had a taste of it. Sometimes you do something for a while, and then you put your head into something then. And there was a friend of mine, Vaughan Thomas. He's a guide down in Pembroke, and he takes people out. And I actually did a podcast with him back a few months ago. And he took me to this little lagoon. It's a saltwater lagoon. And we were fishing, hopefully to catch mullets, we were. And I had a lovely bass, probably about 4.5 pound, in this lagoon. It was like fishing a still water. It was brilliant. And then I had a taste for it. And I was fishing then a local river here on the Ogmore. And I've had a few down there as well. Nothing big, 2 to 4 pound. But it's something which I'm really getting into. But the thing is, I've caught them in the day just as much as the night. But the anglers here, the local anglers, they're all for fishing at night. No, waste time in the day. So I've gone with it. I haven't had a great deal of success in the night, to be honest, with the fly. I've had a couple, but and it's a short window because where I fish is tidal, and then the fish are coming in with the tide, and then you got probably the best part of like an hour to 2 hours. And then you might as well forget it then until, the tide comes back. Now, do you have most of your success in the day or the night?
So that's a good question. And one that I could probably go down, get into too many details with, but in general, so when I was fishing a lot of the start for bass fishing, it was nearly all lure fishing. We fished mainly from the rocks, day and night. So generally when the calm conditions come in, like say if big high pressure comes over, we almost turn completely nocturnal and we'll fish from night off the rock marks and off the beaches, and they are incredibly productive. The nighttime sessions, when they switch on, will kind of, generally when you find the fish at nighttime, they'll feed longer and they'll take better than in daytime. And generally, not always, you'll have a better stamp of fish at nighttime. So that's kind of what we found with the lure stuff. But you will have just as good fishing during the day when you get it right and the conditions are nice and you have a bit of a southwesterly breeze is what we look for. We look for a bit of fizz on the water just to oxygenate it up, and it probably helps kind of disorientate bait fish, and the bass probably like it as well. And that's kind of my ideal daytime conditions. When it's calm during the day, it can be very, very difficult. And that's when the fly kind of comes into its own. that kind of lighter approach with smaller baits. You can really drop down fly size to little shrimp patterns and little bait fish patterns, and that's when I've been on the rocks and I've outfished the lure guys, which generally doesn't happen. The lure guys usually outfish you 5-1 when you're fly against lure. But when the conditions turn calm, that's when the fly comes into its own. The fly at night time is a different kettle of fish for us anyway. We generally don't fish estuary marks as much, so it's generally rock marks, some lagoon type situations as well. And what we fish is open beaches, clean sand at night time. The fly, for whatever reason, really struggles on those beaches. This is a code I've been trying to crack for the last 3 or 4 years now. I've been one of my good friends, Rupert Harvey, great fly tyer, has been trying to design flies that are like Senkos, which the lure guys do so good on, and we just can't seem to get it to work. I have a funny feeling it might be distance related. So obviously, when you're on a shallow beach, you can chuck your lure 60, 70 yards, whereas you're only, best case scenario, throwing your fly 30 yards at night time.
Yeah.
And I think the distance thing might be an issue, because this time last year we were fishing one of the clean beaches here on the southern coast, and I was determined to get one on the fly. I knew there had been a few fish around because the guys on the lures had told me in the last couple of days they'd been catching good numbers of fish. So I went down to this particular spot that has a couple of boulders on it, and I know that the fish sit generally quite close in, so I thought this might be a good spot to get them at. So I went down with a fly anyway, and I had a big long white fly on, hollow tie, that was, for all the world, looks just like a Senko, just like a white Senko in the water that the guys were catching the fish on. And I put this white Senko put the white Senko fly, should I say, through this reef, for 15, 20 minutes. And one of the guys beside me, about 15 yards up, had 3 fish in that time, 3 schoolies in that time on his white Senko. And I said, "Oh, here, give me that lure rod. I need to just put it through just to cure my curiosity, see if there's anything there." Not lying to you, Gary. First cast with that lure rod, I hooked a 70 centimeter bass, and it didn't take too far out, so I was just like, oh, it was great. And I landed that fish. I was delighted, I was happy, but I was like, why isn't he taking the fly? So that's something I've been working on the last few years, which is good fun. But I think it might be distance related, to be totally honest, and that it's not actually to do with the fly, because when we go out on the rocks, where the fish are generally much closer, and it kind of evens the playing field a bit with the lure guys, they'll eat the fly happily, very, very happily eat the fly at night time. And
when you're fishing
some of
the
the darker colours.
When you're fishing the fly, do you actually fish an intermediate or like a wet cell 2 or a floater even?
Intermediate is my go-to line. Nearly 99% of the time I'll be fishing an intermediate line. At night time, I generally like to fish the high a little bit higher up on the surface. So I don't go to a floater, but I'll go to like a slow intermediate. Yeah. I just think that fly fishing slightly higher in the surface column can help, because bass are looking up, it'll create a better silhouette, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that's something the only time I'd change over to from an intermediate to a slow intermediate.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I will fish a floater if it's, if there's a lot of fish around and you want to have some fun with crease flies and things like that. I mean, a floater can be great fun. If there's a bunch of schoolies about, they're happy to eat surface flies.
Do you find that there's bigger fish, like in the spring with salmon? Do you find this the same with the bass? The bigger fish come early in the season, or not?
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah,
they do?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my favourite times on the coast would be the shoulder seasons, what we call them, like March, April, and then we'll say October, November, December. They're my absolute favourite times on the coast. Like the summer fishing can be great, but it can get really, really difficult.
Right.
For whatever reason, maybe there's just a lot of bait fish around and stuff like that. I don't know, or it's hard to put a finger on it. But you can have some magical fishing in the summertime as well, and I still do quite a lot of it. But my favourite time is the time where I'll be, running to the coast and nothing kind of stop you get out there would be those early season and late season. If I had to pick, my favourite month would probably be October, maybe even November. and it's when you get the conditions. The hard thing, I think last year we had maybe 2 occasions in November that we actually got to go out because the weather was just consistently crap. We had, I think, 4, 6, 7 southerlies for the entire month, and that kills the fishing for us from a fly and a lure perspective on the Copper Coast because it's so shallow. It churns up the water, and we get really, really coloured water. And that, it can be fantastic for bait fishing, and the bait fishing will be brilliant. But the bass just, for us, they need that visual stuff to see the lure, see the fly. And without that, we struggle massively. So we had 2 occasions, and the 2 occasions that we had any bit of sort of clarity in the water, it was fantastic fishing. I mean, we really had some really, really good fishing from bass from kind of 3 pounds all the way up to 7, 8 pounds. Really, really great fun. And they're so aggressive that time of the year. It's definitely my favorite time to be out there.
What's your PB?
PB, on the lures. So I suppose I started bait fishing for bass. I had multiple doubles, but they were all around kind of 10 pounds. PB on the lures was a fish close to 11 pounds.
Right. And
then PB on the fly is, I haven't hit the magic double on the fly. I've had one just over 8 on the fly. I'm still chasing the double on the fly.
It's a fabulous fish, mind. The size, like I'm looking for, if I can get a 4 or 5 this year, I'll be happy on a fly.
Yeah. And do you know what, Ceri? Those kind of fish between 5 and 7 pounds, we always say they fight the best. They're just,
is it?
There's something about that size class. They just are full of beans, and they really give you a good run around. And actually, sometimes the bigger fish generally can kind of flop in a bit, and not
is it
not give up as good a fight as those fish in that size. But yeah, they're great. Whatever size they come, the bass, they're just fantastic fish.
Yeah, like the fish I've had up to, like I said, 4.5. They've been more dogged. You sort of strike and they sort of knocking around, and then they come a bit closer, knocking around. I haven't had no screaming runs, so maybe the bigger fish will. The 5 to 7, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you get them in a bit of a riptide, that'll be one of my kind of favorite places to get them to. If you have a bit of current, be it at an estuary mouth or a tidal lagoon where the water's maybe ebbing out of it on an ebb tide, and you're swinging the flies. I love that type of fishing. It's like a cross between river fishing and sea fishing. You're kind of swinging your flat wings and stuff like that to the fish, and I mean 4 or 5 pound fish in that sort of riptide can just be fantastic. I mean, your 8 weight or your 9 weight is completely doubled over.
Brilliant.
And you'll sure enough be close to seeing the back end on those occasions anyway.
Yeah. Well, one of the first times I fly fished for bass was a good few years ago when I was working for the magazine, and we wanted to do a feature. So I had done about 2.5 pound at the time, and we wanted to do the whole a nice feature, a nice spread of pictures. So we knocked it on the head, and we had a barbecue, and we cooked it within minutes of catching it. And to be honest, I'm not a fish lover anyway, but I was so disappointed in it. Right, for a fish which is classed as almost not so much a delicacy, but it's expensive to buy bass, in a restaurant. And I thought this is going to be nice, but it wasn't. I found it quite bland. And fun enough, I spoke to a chef friend of mine then, not long after, and he said, he said more sea fish, he believes, needs to be eaten the day after. Have you come across that?
Yeah.
We said the flavour isn't the same.
I've heard that, yeah. Yeah, I've heard that with some of the gadoids like cod and haddock and things like that people say that if you eat them too fresh, the flesh will just fall apart. It hasn't had time to set, almost, is the word a fisherman told me before.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes I think it's the mackerel that you need to eat mad fresh. They're just delicious, you know. But bass, I'm not the biggest fan of eating them either. You know, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't generally like bass. I'd never pick it in a restaurant or anything like that to eat. And yeah, it's not. It wouldn't be top of the list on as a favorite fish of mine to eat anyway. Just don't think it would compare really to salmon or sea trout.
Yeah. What do you fly fish in for them? What nylon would you use strength wise?
I generally run a tapered leader of about 9 foot, which goes down to maybe 12 to 15 pound range is what I'm using.
Is it?
Most of the time, yes.
Yeah.
Now that's for when I'm fishing the rock marks and where, you know, it's not uncommon to get broken off by fish where we fish. Like I was broken twice last year by nice fish. It's just so it's crazy terrain, really rough ground, shallow reefs, and fluorocarbon is generally what I'm running in that leader to 15 pounds. And then if the conditions are calm and the water's clear, I'll run right down to 8 pounds, maybe even 6 pounds. You know, if I think it's needed, because sometimes you'll often find you'll get lots of follows by fish. They'll follow the fly right into your feet and then turn at the last second. Whether that's they see you or whether it's leader related, I don't really know. But on those calmer conditions, I generally drop down fly size and I drop down leader strength as well.
Yeah,
probably just a confidence thing, I suppose, more than that.
Yeah, the stretches I fish, well, it's in the estuary area, so there's not the snags and the rocks like you be fishing. I fished Maxima Green, 8 pound.
Oh yeah.
Maybe I could go a little bit higher, perhaps, but with all my fishing, I try to get away with fishing as small as I can. Really. Yeah. And do you know what? I've learned something this week. Well, the last 2 weeks, I've like yourself, I fished fluorocarbon for years, and I forgot more or less about Maxima Green, and I was given some to try last year, and I thought, I forgot about it. And do you know what? I was up on a local lake here now, Talabont. It's full of wild browns, and this one day I actually struck and hooked into 9 fish this one day. Browns, nothing big, up to a pound or so, but I could feel the bang. I struck, and they were, as soon as I struck, they were off, and I couldn't believe it. And I just for a matter of interest, then I switched, and I put Maxima Green on 5 pound. Right, I had 4 with stick, and the next day, the 2 days after, I put Maxima Green on from the start, 5 pound, and I had 6, and I'm afraid to go back to fluorocarbon now. I don't know what it is, whether or not they can, because I was nymphing, and then you get that bang. So I'm thinking, if I'm getting that bang, the fish is probably getting it. So when I'm fishing fluorocarbon, slow anyway, when you're fishing fast, it's different, slow. There's a little bit of give in it, and they hold on to it that little bit more. It's something which I've learned.
A little bit of stretch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I know some of the bass anglers that I fish with lure-wise, a lot of them have switched to mono for that exact reason, to give them a bit of stretch. They felt like they were losing fish in takes, and it just didn't allow them that stretch in the line, which when you're fishing, the general kind of way to go about bass lure fishing at the moment is braid, and then you'll have a fluorocarbon leader. And that's, there's no give in that at all. Braid will just be rock tight, fluoro rock tight as well. So this bass angler who I listen to a lot now, he's kind of one of the really good guys on the coast there, catches a lot of fish. Just completely switched over to mono, and is much happier and feels he's not losing as many fish, and just is generally happier with mono, and that stretch is given, and I've heard that from a few anglers, and it's one of those things. I have mono in the bag all the time, and on those calm days I'll switch. When I say I'm dropping down to lighter leader, I'll be switching to mono, because I've also heard things like the sunlight going through fluoro, and it shows up quite badly, you know, and if there's any sort of mark on your fluoro leader, the sun can catch it.
All right.
So that's another kind of one of those things I've become paranoid about now, and I'll run a mono tippet, we'll say, on the end of my leader on those calmer conditions. But mono fluoro leaders is something I've played around a bit a little bit, not much, but there's definitely something in it. It's definitely something I need to pay more attention to, I think, from a hook and fish, and especially when you need that little bit extra stretch maybe on some of the bigger fish.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, fingers crossed. I'm going to come over in September now. I was hoping to go earlier in the year, obviously, to catch the mayfly and that. But if the bass are around and you're around, you can show me a couple of marks when I come over in September. We'll have a go at the bass.
Absolutely, Ceri. 100%. We'll get a session on the Copper Coast. It'll be my pleasure to show you around. If you can get around new moon or full moon tides in September, we'll most certainly be out somewhere along the way, and it could be great to get you along, because September is a fantastic month. And
great for photography as well, isn't it? On the coast there.
It is, yeah. The sky just lights up. It's just been magic at times. Yeah. And then if the coastline is on, I mean, you'll love it, because it's just, high rocks, especially on the Copper Coast that time of the year. There's one or two spots we fish particularly, and 90% of the time, I don't know what it is about the rocks or whatever way the mark works there, but the fish will follow your fly to your feet 90% of the time. You'll see the eat. Oh, it's just electric, because you're on a high rock. It's a high water mark. It's a little bit different to all the other spots we fish. So you're quite elevated, and every time, well, I'd say nearly every time you're watching your fly come in, and you'll just see the shadow cruising behind your fly. It's just brilliant.
Why do you call it the Copper Coast?
They used to ore copper on it. It was a famous bit of coastline, mining town. For the 25 kilometers of it, they used to mine copper, and the ships used to come over from, I think it was Cornwall, and there's all the relics of this old kind of mining past all the way along the Copper Coast, and it's fantastic. You can do some Google images. It's just an incredible bit of coastline. Yeah, and I mean, there's the old towers of where they used to do the melt out the ores, I imagine, and then the tunnels. There's old tunnels all the way through all the old caves and stuff like that. So it's really interesting place, kind of steeped in history as well. But the geologists love it too. It's a real ancient coastline, loads of kind of old volcanic history stuff attached to all the rock formations there. The geologists love. So you're more likely to bump into a group of geologist students than you are to bump into a group of anglers.
Is it?
Funny place, but it's just bass heaven. It's like someone, if you could draw some nice bass ground, it's like, you could go in there and you paint a picture of the Copper Coast. So such a photogenic place. You can really get some fantastic images along it. It's just it kind of epitomizes everything about wild fish and wild places, and it's really nice. It'd be actually good to pick your brains about photography. It's one of those kind of side hobbies that I have that I love.
Is it?
But I try to do a bit of the kind of magazine article stuff. It's something that I really enjoy doing. It's hard to carve out the time to do it as well.
I find them torn sometimes between the rod and the camera. You're like,
yes.
Like this week now, it was a glorious evening in Talabont where I fish, and I was stopping and starting. I put the camera down, get a tripod, take some nice pictures. Then I'm thinking, I'm not really catching fish now. And then I start fishing again, and I'm thinking, oh, look at the lights coming down on that hawthorn bush there, and But it's hard actually to get nice pictures when you're on your own. It
is. It's difficult. I've almost stopped trying to do it when I'm on my own, because I usually just have the GoPro mounted on a little gorilla tripod-y jobby, and I just leave it set up, and if I catch a fish, I just shout GoPro, start recording, and I'll stand in front of the GoPro with the fish and pull a still from that. But if I'm on my own, I have my Canon with me, and if the light is nice, 100% get that. And if I'm fishing with the guys as well, I always like try to get a few nice pictures for them, because at the end of the day, when I'm out with friends and stuff like that, I don't care about catching fish as long as we have a bit of crack and stuff like that. And I'm always just trying to get nice images of the fishing, because I'd nearly value them as much as having as catching a fish sometimes, especially when I'm out bass fishing and stuff like that. But when I'm on my own, I've stopped bringing the DSLR because it's too heavy, and I just fish then.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm torn at the moment now, because I normally, when I'm fishing, I've got my waders on and you're wading out and you've got your net on your back and then you're fishing. But now, I want to keep I take one DSLR body and 2 lenses in a small bag on my back.
Yeah.
But then it gets in the way because I've got a net on it as well. But I've just got another net now. It's a nice wooden one, Eden made one. And I'm going to work away, going to put that on my side somehow. But I always like to fish and walk. I don't put anything on the bank. Mm-hmm. So it's not got to be on my back. But this week, I done something stupid. I had this nice fish, put 1.5 pounds, and it was lovely markings. And I thought, right, I'll get a picture of this now. So I kept it in the net, put my camera down low, just to the side, probably about 20 foot down the bank, set it up to focus. And I went back to the net then, set it on video. I lifted the fish out to the net then and slipped it in. A nice slow motion. I thought it was, I had it on my head. I went back to the camera. I forgot to press record.
Oh no! I had a moment with salmon last year. Biggest salmon I had on the fly last year he was around 18 pounds or so. She was around 18 pounds, and I had my DSLR with me and this was actually the moment that made me. Like I think I nearly got the GoPro this evening after this happening. So I got this lovely salmon, absolutely delicious, made up. And I set up the DSLR, pulled focus, I thought, to where I was standing. And sure enough, I clicked I put on the 10-second shutter release, and I had the fish in the net below me. And you hear click, dee, 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 and you lift the fish up to take the photograph. But I did it 3 times. And they pulled focus onto me and not the fish. So the fish is kind of, out of focus. And it's slightly off. And it was just one of the nicest, it was probably one of the nicest salmon I had that year. And I picked up the photo and I was just like, fuck, that's annoying now. So that's where I went to get a GoPro, because at least I know everything in focus then, and I don't need to worry about it. And I actually started using the GoPro this spring. And it's grand. I just have it down the wader, especially if I'm fishing on my own. And I just pull out the tripod, mount it onto the bank, and just say, GoPro, start recording. And it shoots in 5K. So you're able to pull these super high quality images from the video. Nice. You just pull an image, which is handy. But if I'm ever out with the guys, it's always the DSLR that I'll take and try to get some nicer kind of quality pictures. Because there's when you compare them, the GoPro is as good as it is, but it's the quality and the dynamic range just isn't there. No. When you look at a Canon image or a Nikon image or whatever.
Is it Canons you use, is it?
Yeah. Canon I use.
Well, I've got Nikon gear, but it's something which, as you said, then you got a nice fish and then you got to set the focus, put it on a tripod and go to roughly where you think. I thought, I got to get around this somehow. Like you said, it's slightly out, so, and you're fiddling around and you want to get the fish back as well. So then what I've looked this week, and I didn't realize this, there's a remote trigger which you can put onto the Nikon. One of the cameras I got is a Nikon D750. So you put a remote trigger on the camera and you can press it. And not only does it take a picture, it focuses. So when you press it,
brilliant.
The lens focuses to what it's looking at before it goes. And I thought, dream. So, and it's only about 30 quid. So I've ordered one this week now. There must be something to do, something the same with Canon as well.
There will be, absolutely. I used to connect it using the Canon Connect on my phone, the app. If I was doing if I was standing on a rock, I'd set up my camera nicely behind me and get a really nice kind of landscapey type shot.
Yeah.
And they're easy to do and they're handy to do because you can pull focus through the app on you, we'll say, so the angler's in focus or whatever.
Can you?
But yeah, that was really handy. But it drains the battery, absolutely drains the battery, because it works through Wi-Fi. So you're looking at live view, we'll say, almost live view. I think there's like a 2-second lag, and you can set up, frame your shot, walk into frame, then open the camera or open your phone, have a look at how it's looking,
Wow.
and you can actually tap the screen to pull focus. And that works grand. But like when you have a fish, it's impossible because your hands are wet. You can't use the phone because it's down your waders. You know, your two hands are occupied. That's why the voice control for me is just a game changer. Just being able to say, GoPro, take photo, and it'll just start snapping like burst photos. But if anybody saw me there with a salmon last 2 weeks ago, I was roaring up on the bank. I was like, GoPro, start recording. And I'm like roaring at this GoPro. This salmon just in the net, like, oh God.
I know.
But no, they have worked quite well now. And,
I've done a similar thing. I've got a Samsung phone. It's the Galaxy Note 10, I think it is. And then you can put the camera on the tripod, and that's all you got to do is say shoot, and it goes like that, you know. And there's a couple of times it doesn't. So like you said, then you shout in, shoot, and you can see people in the distance, and you feel like a proper knob, like, you know, holding a fish.
Yeah. So true. But it's all fun and games. But it's nice to get the photos of that good fish. You know what I mean? The photography is just something that's always kind of gone hand in hand with the fishing for me. Look, I just love photography. It's kind of one of those kind of side hobbies anyway. I do it side of fishing, but you know, pairing it with the fishing can be good fun when you're out with a group and stuff like that. And I enjoy doing the articles. It's just something I'd like to get stuck into a bit more in the future if time allows. But I have a really nice piece kind of done on October bass fishing last year, and I'm just trying to find the right place to send it to.
I want to fish Sheelin as well, you know. And when we were talking about Sheelin earlier, something come to mind. It was years and years and years. I can't remember. It was 20 or something like that. And friends of mine, they had a caravan on this guy's land right beside the lake called Finney. I don't know if the name of the village.
I drove through it the other day. Yeah.
Did you? And there's some real characters living there, I tell you. And they were deep in cavern, you know, and it's like, it was totally bizarre. This one guy, as soon as we drove in through the gates, I noticed the goat's horns were orange. And this guy had painted these goat's horns orange. So I saw this guy, and he looked really, you know, well, quite a character then, long hair. And and I go up to him, and I said, what's the story with the goat's horns? And he was telling me he paints them to keep the fairies away, you know? And I thought, Jesus, I wish I could have done a podcast on this guy then, because he was like... And you know what? As soon as we went through the gate as well, there was a dinosaur, probably about 20 foot high, he made out of a car. You know, he just he was a true eccentric, you know? And there was a few things, and then we went to the pub in the night then, and we were talking to this guy in the pub, and I was telling him where he was staying, and he was saying, oh, geez, that guy, you know, he does this and does that. And you know what? And he actually believed there were leprechauns that come to visit him in the night. And he was telling me, you know, and after I had about 4, 5, or 6 pints of Guinness, my head started to believe in these things now, right? So when I went to stay in the caravan in the night then, I rolled up my mattress and put it against the door of the caravan just to be on the safe side.
There you go. It's funny what Guinness and the talk of little people do to fellas.
But in that atmosphere, you know, like in the cold day, you think, oh yeah, that's nonsense. But when you're there and you're having a few beers, and it makes you think maybe, you know. And
I know. It's funny. It's like when you're night fishing, you know. It's you could be on this lovely bit of beach in the daytime. You know, it's great, it's lovely, and then as soon as that sun goes down, it starts to get dark. Start hearing all these sounds and noises, and you can convince yourself of anything when you're standing on a beach in the middle of nowhere. in the middle of the night. And a funny one from when we were fishing last 2 years ago now, I think it was, and we were on this beach way off. Like, I mean, it was maybe a 40-minute walk into this beach, deserted, middle of nowhere, and I'm fishing with a friend, and next thing we just hear this massive thud behind us. It was a really calm evening. Like, I mean, it sounded like a person jumping off when you jump off a rock and you land onto the ground, it's a solid thud. Yeah. That's what just was like. I thought it was my friend Clive. Clive thought it was me. And then we kind of met each other on the beach. I was like, were you just messing around there at the back? I thought he was just gone up to the top of the beach, change it was set up or something. He's like, no, I thought that was you. And I was like, no, that wasn't me. And the two of us were just, like, we fished on for 20 minutes, but we just both weren't settled. Like, you just couldn't relax. Your head just goes to all sorts of places. Like, what was up there? What was it? But, it's probably just a fox or something. But, when you're in those moments, you just your mind can wander.
And your senses are heightened in the dark, aren't they?
That's it. Yeah, absolutely.
And you hear, like, when you're walking over across a field, you hear cows coughing, and it's exactly like a human.
It is. Yeah.
I think there's someone following you, like.
Yeah, night fishing is great. It's great for that sort of stuff, and winding people up as well. Sneaking up on people when you're night fishing on the beach is another classic that we do when we're bass fishing.
Yeah.
You could be on the beach, messing with the guys. Someone will be kind of waist deep in the water or something. You'll go right up behind them, and they're just so in the zone when they're fishing, and you just you can really get guys brilliantly doing that. But funny game.
Yeah. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed the chat, and we've touched on a lot of the different subjects which I started to talk about. So perhaps we can go in depth another time, or maybe when I come over in September we can do another podcast then, actually. But
definitely,
it leads me on to one more question now. What this is going to be,
Yeah.
Where would you want to be to make your last cast?
Okay, so if I had one last cast, one last session, it would probably be at a particular rock mark on the Copper Coast that I've kind of got to know very well over the last few years. It takes about 20 minutes to walk into it, and then you have to wait for a specific set of tide to get up on the rock, and it's like a little causeway of rocks across to it. And when you get onto this rock, you have about a 20-minute to 40-minute window depending on the tide. And if I had to have one cast, it would probably be on that rock, casting to the bass as they pass during that 20 to 40-minute window, because it can be absolutely magic at times. And I think I'd be happy if that was my very last cast.
Marvellous. Sounds idyllic. Well, are you going to go fishing this evening, no?
Enjoy. You have moonrise there at about 5:30 this evening, so
is it?
You never know. Yeah. I haven't looked there, actually.
I'll be sending you a picture at about 25 to 6 of the big 6-pound brown.
There you go. Yeah. But anyways, listen, Ceri, enjoyed it, and enjoy the fishing later on. We'll chat about September. We'll definitely try to make it happen.
I look forward, Well, thanks again, James.
All right, cheers, Ceri. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
If this is your first time tuning in, make sure you catch all future episodes by clicking subscribe via the links on my website, castingwithcerijones.com, or via iTunes or your favourite podcatcher. If you like what you've heard on this episode, feel free to drop me a line via my website. Tell me what you've enjoyed, ask a question, or better yet, tell me what you want to hear more of in the future. And if you're looking for additional tips, tackle reviews, or venue information, or just want to see what's been hit in the back of my net lately, search up Casting with Ceri Jones on Facebook or follow me on Instagram. And if you still want more, I'm regularly uploading video content onto the Casting with Ceri Jones YouTube channel, so just check that out and subscribe over there too. Wherever you follow, subscribe, comment or message, I look forward to catching up soon for a good fishing chat. Well, I think that's all for now, so until next time, tight lines and don't strike too soon.